What's up, y'all? Welcome to our first episode of Staff and FaculTEA Sessions podcast. We're so glad to have you here with us. Again, this is all about co-creation, and we spill the tea not to gossip, but to transform.
Yes.
Want to introduce my amazing co-host. My name is Chelsea Lancaster. My pronouns are she, her, ella.
And I'm Ana Garcia, and my pronouns are she, her, ella. Thank you for joining us, and we're so excited to launch this podcast, and we hope you love it.
Yes, this has been a long time dream of ours.
Yeah.
A long time dream of people that we know that don't even know it was their dream. Because when you're in higher ed, you talk about higher ed. It is such a big part of your life. And there's so many things that are going unspoken. So much shame to be dismantled. So many truths to be told. So that's what we're going to do here.
Yeah. So we're excited to launch this, and we hope that you all find it helpful. We want to share a little bit about ourselves so that you can get to know us. So for this episode, we won't necessarily be following our regular structure, which will be to share some of the stories that have already been submitted. And thank you all for doing that. I do think it's important to share what trends we've noticed so far, and most importantly, noticing that the majority of the submissions are coming from women and women of color in particular. Yes. So I think that's something that, might be good to steep on for a bit.
Shine a light.
More to come. But so we're just going to fill you in, and maybe let's start with a quick check-in. How are we feeling today?
Whew. Feeling excited. We did have some technical difficulties, y'all. This is very grassroots, okay? So it was a long morning of getting things together, and it's been a week. It's been a very interesting week. We can't talk about all of that, but but it's graduation season, as some of y'all know, or at least we're in the community college system, right? So it's grad season is hot right now.
All the semester seasons, I think.
Yeah. So, so many mixed emotions. It's my first graduation season where I'm not working in that space anymore. So I'm still showing up because, I love the students and I want to be present to love and support them and cheer them on. And I'm an outsider now. So I just get to show up and glow up and go home, which is
it's nice.
Kind of nice, but it's also a mixed bag.
Fair.
But lots of both and is what we're going to hold in this space. So.
Yeah, and I think that actually is a perfect setup. We are going to try to sit in the messiness of it all. Stepping away from the binary thinking and the black and white thinking, and creating space for the gray. And Lord knows that's where we live most of the time.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Here we are. This week for me has also been a lot. There's been a lot going on, just I think work-wise, life-wise,
fascism-wise.
It's a lot. So, I'm feeling a little tired, a little nervous about putting ourselves out there and that this whole thing, being real, but I'm also super excited, and I think it's something that's so necessary. So I'm really excited to build this community with you all and to learn from each other and share a bit more about ourselves. So
I think it's important for us to acknowledge that in many ways we're scared as hell, but we're doing it anyways because we feel like it's that important. And too many people feel like they're alone. They're not good enough. Whatever it is, right? Decoupling, and we're going to talk about this, decoupling your identity from what you've done, what you do for a living. So I think, there's a lot of anxiety here, but we're doing it anyways.
Yeah. So we'll start with telling you a little bit about our kind of journey here and kind of what brought us here. I came here as an immigrant when I was 5. And, my dad was in and out of the picture. struggled with substance abuse, and then ultimately, left our home, and my mom kind of took everything and got us through life. I often tell people I didn't know that I was poor when I was growing up because my mom worked her butt off to never let us feel that way. And she spent so much time couponing. She is one of those wild coupon women who sometimes leaves the store with them paying her money to take groceries out. So props to mom. She put in a lot of labor, both at her workplace and at her home, to try to make things seem less stressful than they were.
Wait, but are you saying you didn't feel poor at the Scholastic Book Fair when the when those little pamphlets of hell came home? I got one downstairs. I'm very upset about it.
That's fair. Triggered. Leave me alone. And we do have a guest here, Alexis. You'll see her. She's our emotional support pup, so we will. She'll be making appearances. Thank you for your patience and support. But yeah, so I came here as an immigrant, didn't have a whole lot of kind of guidance in terms of my education, career, what that would even look like. My mom ended up working as a housekeeper / nanny for a family who ended up becoming our family. And because of them, we were able to kind of navigate things a little bit better. Without them, I'm not sure that we would have learned that information, And so I feel super grateful that we ended up landing with a family who was kind and really brought us into their world, So I transferred. Originally, I thought I was going to go to community college, and I thought I was going to be a doctor. And, I still love that and want that. But the thought of being a doctor at 18 just got super overwhelming. And then I got a letter from a private school that offered me a scholarship and was like, come here. We have all the things. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess. That sounds fun.
Why not?
So I went, and it was a private school, and it's expensive, and your girl is poor. So I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? So then after my first year, I ended up applying to be an RA, or a resident assistant, and really mostly because I needed the money. It covered housing, it covered a meal plan, so like my basic needs would be met and I wouldn't need to worry, and that was a game changer for me, right? So I went and did it, and then I was an RA for the remaining 3 years of my college journey, and then I graduated right when the recession was hitting, and it was all chaos and no jobs and just bad. And so
bad unless you were like BlackRock.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I ended up luckily, being at the institution where they were starting a graduate assistant program. And so I figured, what the heck, I'm going to apply. Worst case scenario, I have a master's degree at the end of this, and then I'll go back. The degree was going to be in counseling. I still found ways to connect those skills if I decided that I was going to go into the marketing and advertising field, because that's what I thought I was going to do. But then after going through the program and after really evaluating the impact that my mentors had on me in this process, I actually fell in love with higher education, and I was like, oh my gosh, how exciting to be in this space. And especially as a Latina, an immigrant, being able to show up as a possibility model for folks and help create or help shine a light for people's paths and hopefully reduce some of the stress and anxiety through my learning, right? And hoping to share that with folks. So I think that process, and I know that you can relate as well, having our identities so deeply connected to the work that we were doing and seeing that as the core value of what we were doing, made it really hard to separate myself and my worth and my identity from what I did for work. And so I think that is critically necessary in higher education and many of the helping professions, because most of them don't pay super well. And so in order for you to engage in the work for what, we are compensated, there has to be this enmeshment within it to make you feel like this is my purpose, this is my calling, that's why I'm here, I'm not here for the money, right? And kind of villainizing money in this way, that like I'm doing a good thing because it's not about the money, right? Yeah. Even though we live in a capitalist hellscape.
Yep.
So after I finished my master's program, I decided that I wanted to continue in higher education. And so I'm a Sagittarius, and I am adventurous and like surprises. So I decided I was going to explore the East Coast for jobs only. I didn't apply to any jobs anywhere else. I ended up landing in New Hampshire, and I feel really lucky that that was my first professional job, because the team that I was working with was amazing. I met some of the best people there. It challenged me in a way that I don't think I would have been challenged if I had been here, both personally and professionally.
And that cold?
Never again. But moving to New Hampshire, it was super, super white at the time. I think it's still pretty white. I haven't looked up the stats, but I don't think it's as white as it was when I was there. It really was, to the point where, like, in my department, it was very diverse, but outside of our department, like, everybody was white. So sometimes, like, we'd see a random person that didn't work with us that was a person of color, and we'd be like,
who that?
Who is that? Where did they come from? Like, what's
is
going
that a new
on?
hire?
Yeah.
In our department?
We did have some students, too, but it was a very small population. And so that, I think, is really what ignited the fire around the work in equity and seeking justice and seeking representation and all of that. Because it was really the first time that I was in a space where I felt othered. I grew up in California. There's a lot of people that look like me, that have a lot of similar stories. And so I had never felt that before. And so, being surrounded by leaders who actually cared and who were humble and willing to learn and, vulnerable and would own that they don't know everything. It all sounds like the most basic stuff, but it's unfortunate how uncommon that is, especially as you rise through the ranks and get to that place of more and more power. I think the intention is to separate you from yourself and to, again, just enmesh you into the institution and make sure that you are not seeing yourself as an individual, but as an extension of the institution, and so that creates a dynamic that's super unhealthy for the administrators and for those who are impacted by decisions that are being made from that place. I also come from a single parent background. My dad wasn't present a lot of the time, and so seeing my mom kind of work through that whole process, I think, was super impactful. And just, I just want to, I guess, give a big gratitude, boost for my mom and all of the ways that she held us through all of this process and struggled through some of it without having a whole lot of support and resources, which I think is also why I value my relationship with Chelsea so much, because she is so passionate about helping people like my mom, who without, that work, I'm getting kind of emotional, but I'm just grateful for everyone who fights for us and for all of those who feel voiceless or silenced.
Yeah. Ooh. It's getting a little misty in here. Okay.
I have something in my eye. Excuse me.
Which sort of segues into my story. Very briefly, my mom, so I was second gen. My mom was the first in our family to go to college. As a Mexicana single mom at 27 years old, She actually started at the institution that I worked at, then ended up transferring to Berkeley, which was beautiful in that I got to move to Oakland at 10 and really experience a whole different world, and be the other in a way that really pushed me to acknowledge my privileges as a white Latina, how I show up, how I can recognize things like anti-Blackness in education, right? That started for me. I was witnessing it in junior high, and really sort of understanding what my role was, and that was to use my privilege, to use my power to say some shit, to call it out.
And she does. I've seen it.
And so does she. So, you know, I became a mom at 17 in the context of a very violent relationship. And so because my mom had gone to college and graduated when I was a teenager, I didn't get to bear witness to as much of her story and her journey in terms of actually navigating the institution. She was also really good as like a poor single mama of color, a Latina, at hiding that we were poor, right? I never really felt that. And now, like looking in, you can see things differently, right?
Totally.
But
now I realize where all my money trauma comes from.
Yeah.
It was all the unspoken stuff.
Now I realize that like a lot of things we ate were considered like comida de pobre, but they were beautiful.
Yeah,
they were
I
so
know.
good. They're still
some of my favorites.
The
Delicious.
best. So I really, you know, came to higher education to save my own life and to save my daughter's life. And I did that at 18, 19. And with my spongy brain and my, you know, trying to heal and survive basically from the abuse, I wasn't ready. I was also a survivor of many forms of sexual violence and just had a lot of shame, a lot of pain. And everything about that system told me I didn't belong there. As a young single mom, I walked on that campus and I felt like I was in like, you know, I was on Mars and nothing was built for me. And I left and I went and worked for a number of years. And my mom always told me, you'll either struggle for a few years while you're in school or struggle for the rest of your life without an education. That's your choice. And so I finally went back in my late 20s, which is a lot of the story of women like me, of moms, of single moms. We go to school later for various reasons, right? Whether it be life circumstances have changed in many, many ways, seeking new opportunities. Finally, the kids go back to school and you couldn't afford childcare. So, you know, a lot of reasons. And so my journey was also very much like I was in the system, in the same institution as a student worker, as a student activist. When, you know, Bill Clinton and Joe Biden, you know, gutted the welfare system, the safety net, I was one of those moms. And I was mentored by Black and brown women that were going to Sacramento saying, you know, how dare you steal our right to an education? How dare you balance your budget on our babies' backs? And so that was like the context for me kind of coming up in that system and learning and having that modeled for me was so impactful. And I came back and I went to school and I was ready. You know, I did the damn thing. I still didn't feel like I belonged, but nothing was going to stop me at that point. And then I went to the 4-year and they kept me on in the department that I was in as an hourly worker, which doesn't happen as much anymore, right? That was a huge sort of gift. I found out later that I was doing my boss's job. So, you know, that was part of the reason. But
Gift for who?
then, due to sexual harassment, I became an interim in that person's position. And then I applied for it and I got it. And I've been in that system, in that space, in the community college system for 17 years until now, being pushed out. And so you and I have talked about this a lot, right? How much we love the community college system because you get to serve 100% of the community, right? So that means for me, I ended up coordinating programs serving women and other parenting folks like myself. So it was like getting to be who I needed when I was younger and figuring out, you know, with our pattern recognition, which we'll talk about later, right? Being able to sort of see the big picture and use both that experiential wisdom and my education, and then growing as a professional to sort of figure out like what was missing and why can't this system be for somebody like me, right? And with all my privileges, when I think about all those Black mothers, those brown mothers, those Indigenous mothers, those mothers with disabilities, the poor mothers, the mothers that are out on the front lines, you know, fighting for our right to exist every single day, right? So how am I going to use what I'm in, the body that I'm in? And so that was kind of how I think I fell in love with Ana too, as a co-conspirator, as a friend, is, you know, we were the people without really knowing one another. And, you know, again, me showing up as a white woman, as a white Latina, you know, with her being like, this bitch is sus. Like, why is she in all the spaces? Why is she doing all the things? Which is legit, right? Question me, please. Question everybody who looks like me. We've got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of work to do. But really being, you know, finally seeing somebody who like said it in the meeting, you know, who, if I said it in the meeting, didn't micro affirm me with a little side chat to say, hey, thanks for saying that, like backed you up in the meeting. And because so many of us are in these systems that are so steeped in respectability, in civility, right, in decorum, so many of us are taught to stay silent, right? That you don't say the thing that's really happening because this is our mission and vision. This is our rhetoric. This is our latest formal commitment to whatever group or movement is, you know, right now. And that, which we're also going to talk about, that moral distress, right? Of figuring out in so many ways that that wasn't true, that wasn't real. And sort of being in this journey together of, for me, you know, taking a lot of my blinders off and like that deprogramming, that decoupling of my identity to be like, no, this is the person that I am wherever I am, right? And I'm an activist, I'm a mother, I do community organizing, I love my old car, and, you know, like, I love my friends, I love my community, and I show up. So that's part of what we want to just talk about with you and to hear from you and to maybe even like introduce or model for you. Because until I met Ana, I had also never worked with anybody in the system that really pushed me to think about those things, right? To, as we're going to introduce later, like steep on those hard questions. Because I was drinking the Kool-Aid, you know.
And it's hard not to.
It's hard not to.
It's a critical piece of higher education, getting us to have our bodies and our identities completely entrenched in everything that is happening.
Do it for the students.
It's always for the students, which we love.
Which we
right?
did.
And like, as we get older and, you know, step into our power a bit more, I think it's becoming clear how me taking care of myself and me having boundaries and me prioritizing my needs actually is benefiting the students and my colleagues and my family and because the more that we can be in our bodies and taking care of our needs, the better we can attune to others.
Absolutely.
Too, you know, and it makes me think of that quote about what would things look like if you were pouring from an overflowing cup versus from an almost empty cup. You know, and you think about it, and, you know, we're talking tea here. At the bottom of the cup, when it's almost empty, you get a lot of the like debris, right? The extra little stuff, which we'll drink. It's not a bad, right? Like there's benefits to that. But how much more powerful is it to say, like, I'm standing here in my power, I'm standing here grounded, and I have an excess of all of this, and so I'm going to share that. Versus, like, I'm going to betray myself or abandon myself. I'm going to choose to be thirsty to give my water away,
Yep.
you know, instead of that. And so like that shift in mentality, I think, can be super powerful
Yep.
in creating change in our institutions, in our world, in our family structures, in our friendship structures. So while we will be focusing on stories related to higher education and the experiences within that, we're also going to bring in our own lives, our personal experiences, because all of that is so connected.
Yeah. Especially as women, right?
Yeah.
And we talk about this a lot as mothers, as tias, as adultified children. You know, a lot of what happens, and it's no accident, right? That women are the ones, women of color, women of consciousness, are the ones that are really guiding our vision for what's next, as we experience what I'm hoping and praying is like the last death cry of patriarchy, right? When we think about the system that we're in, how much of this explicitly happens to women. Because of the way that we're socialized, is that you are expected to give so much more. And you are the one, that mental load, right, that you also carry at home. Like, you're the one that remembers all the birthdays and gets the cake and remembers their favorite candle scent and all that stuff, right?
And at work,
Yeah.
who plans the parties?
Exactly. And that's, you know, it's at home, it's at work, it's everywhere. And so at work, so much, and there's a ton of research on this, but so much of what happens is, you know, women of color in particular, Black women of color, women who are mirrors for those students, end up doing so much uncompensated labor. So much uncompensated labor.
And don't you dare ask for compensation, because then that puts you on the shit list.
Yeah, then you're a bitch, you know, but thinking about even, you know, part of my transformation began with my daughter kind of calling me in, because I ran all these programs for single moms and single parents, but mostly moms, right? And I ran a summer program that was beautiful. Again, it was everything I ever wanted, right, as a student. But as a mom, that meant I never spent a summer with my daughter as a single mom for pretty much her whole life. So how much of myself did I give away to other people's children when I wasn't caring for my own? You know, I was at the beach with other people's kids. I was at the zoo on field trips with other people's kids and not with my daughter. So that it's painful, right? That's part of the grief process that I think we're also here to talk about. And oftentimes you're made to feel guilty for feeling those things, much less saying them. And so much of what we're trying to do is just like have this radical honesty that can lead to, maybe if we can't control like what liberation looks like in the context of where we're living and existing, especially in this country, we can at least have those liberatory dreams and bring some of that into our own lives as much as humanly possible. So we need you to do that too, because we still are learning and growing, and I learn every day. And so I'm excited to learn with you.
Yeah, we're really hoping that we can contribute to the movement that we already see happening, not just in higher education. I think in the U.S. in particular, we live a very different life than a lot of people in a lot of other countries. And the way that our lives are really centered around our work and our busyness and our identities are tied to our productivity. And, it, you know, I think also kind of interweaving some of the other pieces that contribute to that. Neurodivergence, I think, is a huge thing that both of us have been exploring more. You know, we both have ADHD. Our ADHD presents differently. And
I like hers better.
And it's just a lot of messaging that you get when your brain doesn't work for the system that we're trying to survive, you know, and like having all of that shame around not being good enough and like the fear of being seen, which is part of like, I guess where that anxiety comes from to be like, who are we to be having this podcast and having this discussion? But, you know, we're not trying to sit up here as experts. We just want to be vulnerable and share our experiences to try to hopefully create an impact in a way that helps to disrupt the status quo, right? Like, be professional. What does professional mean? It's all rooted in white supremacy. It's all rooted in be cordial, be civil. Don't talk, you know, unprofessionally.
So
be
demure.
Curse. Be mindful, be demure. And and like we need to get to the place where people are feeling confident to speak out, even if it's not perfect. And I think that's been kind of the big shift that we've been kind of stepping into, where, you know, the concept of like cancel culture and then that creating this fear of, well, I'm just not going to say anything because if I say a mistake, then what is that going to mean? Like, we want to shift away from that. We want to get people to feel vulnerable, to speak out, even if it's messy, even if it's not perfect, but be willing to take accountability when you make that mistake, you know, which we've all done. We do it on a regular basis. Every day. And it's hard to get to that place of like actually living in that practice of like, I'm not perfect. I have things to learn. I don't know everything. And there are people who are smarter than me. You know? And so like just being able to see people engaging in that behavior, I think is what we're missing right now. We need people to feel connected, to feel like people have their back. We're in a fascist takeover. And there's not enough discussion about that.
I mean, think about...
It's crazy.
If you think about even being in higher education, right? For a lot of people, and again, we're on all the boards, we're reading your stories, a lot of them already, which again is part of what compelled us to do this, because me being on those boards, in addition to obviously being friends with people that were talking about the shit, made me realize that, I wasn't crazy. This is really happening. And I'm really being gaslit like all day, every day. And I'm showing up to do the work. And I'm fighting for literally the basic things that...
I mean, we're not asking for the world. No. Just, I want to be treated as a human who deserves to have joy, who deserves to have rest, who deserves to have peace, and who deserves to feel respected.
Like, I'm doing dignity work, right, with my students, and I'm not being treated with dignity in a dignified way. And so I think, you know, so much of that, again, I was like, why am I so angry? Why am I feeling so misaligned with this thing that I once loved? You know, people talk about burnout, and oftentimes they're talking about, you know, working with the students, right? And for some people that's real, and I totally acknowledge that. For me, though, it was much more about the institution, about the bureaucracy,
the systems,
about the barriers that you're just like, my God, push a button, you know? Like, I've seen you push buttons where you could change you could drop this whole wall for this student.
Yeah, like, remember COVID?
And
when we were begging across the country to be like, let's do more virtually. We have all this technology and we're still kind of doing stuff in this like ancient way. And then people were like, we don't have the tools. We don't have it. We cannot do it. And then COVID hit, and literally in a month max, everything shifted to be fully online. People pivoted. Why did that happen? The motivation was the money. Right? Like, if we don't do this, we're going to lose students. We're going to lose, you know, agency in our institution. And so we now value this because we see the benefit to us as an institution.
Yeah.
Before, when you were talking about the students
Yeah.
and the needs, it's like, well, yeah, but like that's going to cost us money, and ROI, the return on investment, isn't there.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's part of what we want to really push on too, is like who's making the decisions, what's informing those decisions, and how can we, as, you know, often people that are less powerful, have less agency in our positions, how can we kind of impact those decision makers and advocate for our students and for ourselves and our colleagues. I think that's been one of the things for me that has been super powerful, because I do feel like a lot of the people who work in higher education have the student at the center of what we're doing.
Yes.
Especially those of us that are frontline working with students every day, day in, day out, staff, faculty that are doing direct student service, right? Like I think most of us are at least trying to advocate. Do we make mistakes? Do we miss opportunities? Of course. Yeah. But one of the things that I feel really passionately about is the advocacy for my colleagues. Because nobody else is doing it for us, you know, and we are put in a position where we don't have the agency, and then there's the fear of, you know, higher ed being such a small community, really. I mean, you know, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, 6 degrees of everyone. Like, it's a small field, and you cross the wrong person, and that might mean no more career for you.
Absolutely.
And that's a real risk, right? So part of the reason that I think we decided to launch this now is that we don't want a career in higher education anymore. So we are finding ways to create revenue streams for us so that we can survive and hopefully get to thrive someday. But it's just, and you know, this isn't a new thing necessarily. And I just read an article about how many women, and women of color in particular, are transitioning into entrepreneurial fields because the struggle of working places it's a whole thing. So that's a lot of what we will be kind of hoping to shine a light on through this podcast.
And that's one of the things, right? With COVID, it was like, you know, we pivoted, and again, holding the both and, right? There were a lot of things that we were told that we could never do, that like, oh, every student can get a Chromebook. Hell yeah. Like, we've been asking for that, right? Our students are houseless, they're housing insecure, they need that, right? Oh, they can get a hotspot because they're in our parking lot on their computers trying to do their homework because there's Wi-Fi, right? And then sort of juxtaposing that with, you know, the pushback to being in buildings, right? And what that's about. And a lot of it is, again, we do need to be there for the students and create student life and those communities. But really so much of it is about control,
it's all
right?
Control.
And so for us trying to figure out, again, in this world, like, really wanting to figure out how to be more autonomous beings, right? That like, I'm a whole ass grown woman. The whole like, because I said so is not really working for us anymore. And I think that's what it became abundantly clear that once we weren't allowed to have the conversations anymore, like about things like, oh no, we're not going to talk about anti-Blackness anymore. We're not going to talk about you know, COVID and all these other illnesses when I'm working in a 10 by 12 office serving entire families, and I've gotten hand, foot, and mouth and all these other things where I'm like, maybe a little more space. I don't know. I liked that part of COVID. I don't know, like personal space.
Yeah.
So we're trying to really like, part of this is fight that return to normal that never should have existed, right? And just like Anna said, when you're in the system, it's taking a huge risk to talk about these things. And we're still struggling. And just to be clear, I was the staff member for many years, and Anna is part-time faculty, both a counselor and an instructor. So we both, you know, were in pretty marginalized places in our work. I had protections in terms of being unionized, and I ended up doing leadership work within our union because I really believe in that. But I was also very, when we talk about the classism in the system, right?
Yeah.
The level of disrespect, right?
Yeah.
Even if I had some safety in terms of my job, there was no psychological safety, right? There was no safety from other attacks that were happening that were really disruptive. So,
and the impact of that on like your ability to make more money.
Yeah.
And, we live in Santa Barbara. It's not a cheap place to live.
$98,000 a year, according to the LA Times, is going to be our new low income bar.
Welcome to hell. But, the struggle is real. And so, again, when you're put in a position where you have to make a choice around advocating for yourself or your colleagues or your students and their dignity and humanity, or like being able to live, because if I lose this job, especially now, right? Let's not joke about the current job market that we're in.
I'm out there right now. It's hard,
the struggle's real.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are trying to transition out of all of these different positions, and the, fascist regime taking over and taking budgets away and making things uncertain in a lot of the higher education institutions and other kind of social services. It's just creating a dynamic that complicates all of this a little bit more.
Yeah,
where
and systems are collapsing,
Yeah.
right? Which is what we've also been trying to name for a long time, that like, this is, especially in the US, this is like one big old house of cards. So if we're talking about really learning how to sustain ourselves, right? Pushing that Overton window to the left all the time, right? To just understand that, when we look at, I'm out there in the job market right now, and man, we could talk about higher ed all day, and we could talk about the nonprofit industrial complex all day, and we could talk about working in government all day. It's rough.
And corporate too.
Yeah, corporate,
all of any workplace.
Yeah.
The dynamics may present differently, but it's all stemming from the same oppressive systems.
Yep.
And so we just want to create an opportunity to engage around that, and to just empower each other to feel confident in saying something when something needs to be said.
Yep.
And one of the things that I know I started implementing, and I think you did too, as two people who are very vocal and often challenge, administration and government officials and all of these things.
Just did it on Thursday.
Yeah. So it's a lot. And it's hard to be the only person who is actually speaking out loud, and then having people who were present in those meetings email, text, find us after the meeting to validate us and to thank us for saying what we needed to say, while at the same time leaving us basically hanging out to dry by ourselves, reinforcing the message that like, I'm crazy or you're crazy for saying the
You're
truth,
a problem for naming the problem.
for telling the truth. And, again, I don't think either of us are the type of person who only talks about the problems and doesn't offer solutions. The solutions are some of our favorite things. We love to get into the nitty gritty and try to, build solutions. But it's hard when you're existing in a system that doesn't really want those solutions, because it is working as it was designed, So we want to create a space that hopefully helps us all feel empowered, and like we have backup.
Yeah.
You're not the crazy one. You're not out there floating on your own. We will affirm you from here. And we hope that as more of us kind of engage in this conversation, you will start to see your colleagues showing up for you too in those spaces, because that's a game changer.
Yeah. And that's part of this, is like, we're here to do this with you and to do this for you. If you're not in a space where you can be out there and say what needs to be said, that's part of why, we want you to submit those stories, right? Is because you may not be safe to share that experience. But we will share that experience, right? Anonymously, you could be on the show, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah.
And that could save somebody's life. And I mean that as somebody who experienced so much pain at parts of my career that I thought about not wanting to live anymore. Because
same.
I was doing everything I could, and there was so much rejection and so much pain and shame, even when I was winning awards and all these things,
You're never good enough.
You're never good enough. And a lot of it is that our light, we shine a mirror on a lot of people, and we say it in the meeting, and people,
and that feels threatening.
People don't like that very much.
And like an attack.
Yeah. So for me, I always felt like, what's wrong with me? Like, why? I'm giving my whole heart and soul to things. I'm doing the damn work. The students love me. I love the students. I don't understand. And I didn't understand until I understood, right, that it wasn't me, it was the system. And
we're still understanding.
Yeah. I mean, whew.
Lots happening.
It's right.
It's lifetime work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm fresh out, and really trying to heal. And so we, bell hooks talked about healing as an act of communion, right? And so this is sort of what we're doing together, and doing it in a public way, to hopefully, again, spark that in somebody else.
Yeah. And as we get here to the end of our episode, I think one of the pieces that I felt really strongly about including in our work here is to highlight the people who are modeling all of this for us, and who are doing something to change the actual material conditions that we're existing in. Yep. Obviously, no one person can change anything on their own, but again, we want to be able to celebrate where people are feeling the fear and doing it anyway, where they're putting aside their comfort to, support their colleagues, support their student, support and advocate for themselves. So we hope that you will join us in that. We will use part of our time together to share people who we are, admiring and looking up to. And we hope that you will share those folks with us as well. And we will shout them out here because, we just don't get enough praise either. And not everybody wants or needs praise, but I think it's important to recognize the work and the labor that people are putting in to support community. Yeah. And that's ultimately what it is. We want to shift from this very individualized, I have to be about me and only me at any cost, and say like, okay, when is it enough? When do I have enough? When can I actually look around and see how something could be better if we did it different? Yeah. And so we're going to call this the Raise Your Mug segment. And so for this week, we raise our mugs, funny mugs, to highlight mostly this because of where we started this episode and talking about the grad season. We really want to highlight our students, the graduating students, the student activists who are pushing institutions to stand on business, to do the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable, even when there's things at risk. I also want to give a shout out to Harvard. Obviously, they have a lot of privilege. That endowment, I think it's in the billions.
It ain't no joke.
So they have resources, right? But that's what we're talking about. That's what we need. We need people who have less to fear to stand out and say, not today, Satan.
Yeah. And that shit pays, right? Look at what happened to some of the big retailers that we love very much that didn't stand on business when it came to DEI, right?
Target's floundering.
People have divested from all those spaces, right? So for us to even reframe, it's not about the almighty dollar, but also right now, you know, a little bit of solidarity in the context of growing fascism, it can pay.
Huge difference. Huge difference.
So yeah, we're thinking about all of those students. We're thinking about all the academics and activists and people who have taken real risks and lost a lot, right? To tell the truth. And especially, like, you know, thinking about the conversation, how it shifted around what's happening in Gaza, right? And all of those folks that have been speaking on Gaza and lost everything. And this is how we look at how little ripples, right? That we can change the conversation and we can create a new sort of groundswell. And as you see, our setup is very grassroots. We're in my bedroom near my closet. But we're trying to create a groundswell where everybody is necessary, right?
And we all have different gifts and talents that we can contribute to the movement. So, you know, don't shame yourself if your gift isn't presenting in the way you think it should, because you are necessary. Everything that we all can do in our own individual ways is necessary. We often talk about this ourselves, and even though both of us have a lot of the same values and show up to meetings with the same intentions, it presents totally different. You know, like Chelsea tends to be a lot more comfortable with off the cuff conversation, public speaking in that way. I tend to want to be a little bit more prepared. I like to write things down a little bit, you know?
Again, I like her ADHD better.
And yeah, I think it's different. And, you know, in a one-on-one setting, that looks different for me too. I feel like, you know, I am a lot more comfortable in that like smaller group, smaller meeting setting versus like, I'm, you know, making a public comment at something. It's harder for me to feel comfortable just being like, I'm going to get everything I need to say into this space, you know, and it's all powerful and it's all necessary. And so like, I think, again, that's one of the things that I really appreciate about our relationship and our dynamic is that we are true girls. We're here to like hold each other up, to pump each other up when we're feeling down, and to stop each other from allowing those negative thoughts to sit and fester and lie to us about our worthiness and our deservingness of insert the blank, you know, whatever it is we're talking about.
And the beauty is, you know, we can show up differently, right? And it all matters because it's all authentic. AF, and people feel that, right? I show up and I use a lot of my story, especially right now with the things that I'm fighting for, and so does Anna, and we feed off of each other's energy, and we can tell a story that's a really compelling story in a different way, but you're gonna feel it, you know?
And honestly, even though beautiful. It's scary, like, I don't think there's ever a time that when I choose to say something, that I'm not fearful. I am often terrified because I know what's potentially at stake, but my priority is us as a community. It's creating spaces that are safe. And literally, I mean safe. Like, we live in a very violent world, very violent country where people's safety is not a priority. Look at all of the things that, you know, are being legislated. So I feel the fear and do it anyway. And you only get to that place by practicing, just like everything else, right? Nobody, or I won't say nobody because I'm sure there are some prodigies out there, but for the most part, all of us have to work on our crafts. Soccer player, baseball player, musician, teacher. Nobody's like coming out of the womb just killing it. right? We all have to learn, we all have to practice, we all have to try. And so that's really, again, what
it's the calisthenics. You gotta build the muscle. And there's so many ways to show up too. I know we're talking a lot about like saying it in the meeting, right? And there are a lot of folks that aren't going to show up that way, right? Or there are language barriers, or there's so many ways to show up. And we acknowledge everybody that's showing up in all the ways. And when we talk about those beautiful ceremonies, right? I want to talk about, you know, the people, the classified workers, you know, typically Mexicano brown men, right, that are there keeping all those grounds so beautiful, right? All the folks in our staff positions that are cleaning up afterwards, that are setting up those beautiful stages, that are working extra hours uncompensated. Like,
raise our mugs to you.
You deserve compensation. You deserve overtime. That's the law. And we know that's messy, right? So if nothing else, we want you to know that we acknowledge you. The interpreters, you know, the ASL folks, like all the people that are making those spaces as dignified, as beautiful, and as accessible as possible. So we appreciate you. All the people cooking that delicious nourishment, that food, serving them. I've had so much Jamaica this week from all the ceremonies we've been to. I'm not mad at it.
Yeah. We raise our cup to everyone who's showing up with care and with intention of celebrating each other and like holding space for each other.
Yeah, because that's one of the ways that we defeat fascism is being in our joy and being in our celebratory power, right? So show up that way, and remember, fighting that shit begins in your own backyard. So go to the next school board meeting.
Yes, seriously.
Say something.
And so I guess that brings us to the end of our episode. Again, this is a little bit different than what we're hoping to share with you in upcoming episodes.
Yeah, less about us, we promise.
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure that you know who you're choosing to engage with. We don't want anyone to feel, you know, like you didn't know what you were getting into. We're wild. We're out here. So don't forget to check us out on socials. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram. And YouTube is where our podcast will be posted. And then, we have we're going to leave you with some things to steep on before we come back together next week.
Yes.
So we found this card.
So these cards, y'all, are some of our favorites for reflection. They are called Dear Sister, Sister. Not Just Sister, Cister, so acknowledging and loving on our trans siblings.
You should show the card.
So this is what this one looks like. The blue hair, love it. So Dear Sister, Not Just Sister. Dismantle and destroy binaries, requirements, boundaries, and spaces that place comfort over growth. Questions for self-reflection and journaling. How uncomfortable are you willing to be? And with that,
we sign off.
Welcome to our community of SolidariTEA.
Yep. And don't forget to submit your stories to us. You can submit them by going to tinyurl.com/tspillinghe. I'll spell that out. tinyurl.com/TEASPILLINGHE. And also, we'll be posting some stuff on our socials, so please join us there to raise your mug to those that are inspiring you today and to help us create community together. So thank you again, and we'll see you next week.
See you soon.